Hey guys, Dr. Haywood. We're here at the Wyoming Fish Hatchery, just outside of Auburn, Wyoming. We're actually right over there is the Wyoming-Idaho border, and so up this canyon, we're actually in Idaho. But the state of Wyoming has a special agreement with Idaho to put the hatchery here. I'm here with Brian, and he kind of runs the hatchery, and he's gonna talk a little bit about what these buildings are and what they do here.
Hello, I'm Brian. I'm the assistant superintendent here at the Auburn Fish Hatchery.
It's harder on camera,
It
huh?
is, isn't it?
I'll go ahead and keep talking. I'll cut stuff out.
Okay. So at the Auburn Fish Hatchery, we raise trout and salmon, all salmonids. And I'll take you on a brief tour of the facility. Real quickly, down behind me here, the big building is the brood building where we keep our big brood fish. Then we have an isolation hatchery is the little building. We won't actually be looking in there, but that's where we would raise up fish from an unknown source. So if we have eggs coming from a source that we don't have a long disease history on, we can raise them up in there, test them out as fry to verify that they're disease-free, and then they can enter our system. That way, if we have something that does have a disease that's a problem, it doesn't contaminate the whole facility. So then behind us here is the hatchery building where we're going to start.
Cool.
If you want to show up here, you can cut whatever out you don't want.
Okay.
The mounts up here are examples of the sports fish that we have in Wyoming. They're not all the sports fish, but they'll give you a good example of the different trout that we have here. Our native trout are the cutthroat trout. So the one that's native to our drainage here is the Snake River cutthroat up here on top. Then to the north of us, we have the Yellowstone cutthroat. Across the mountains over by Pinedale and going all the way south through the Green River is the Colorado River cutthroat. And then we have a little bit of the native range of the Bear River cutthroat down by Evanston.
Okay. Cool. So here's the state of Wyoming, looks like. And we are
Auburn is right there.
right there.
We're actually about 3 miles inside the state of Idaho.
So we're just across the border up in Auburn here. I live right here in Star Valley. So you guys are all over the state.
So these are kokanee salmon. Kokanee salmon are landlocked salmon, so they never run to the ocean. Instead, what they'll do during their life, they live in large bodies of water, such as Flaming Gorge and Fontanelle. And then when they're ready to spawn or give eggs, they'll run upstream, similar to an ocean-run salmon. They just never go to the ocean. Now what we have here on the kokanee, we like to hatch these out in a jar. You see, these are mostly hatched out. There's a few eggs in there that are still rolling around. But these are what we would call a sac fry. And that's because if you look at their bellies there, that little orange sac is what's left of their yolk sac. And they're going to eat that until it is completely depleted. Once that's depleted, then they'll start swimming up to the surface of the water, and then they'll be called swim-up fry. So you can see these are hatching and they're coming down into these baskets here.
They come up here and drop.
Just drop in. There's a whole bunch in the basket right next to you there. And they just kind of lay there. And they're getting stronger and stronger and bigger. And once they get strong enough, they'll start swimming up to the surface. And that yolk sac will be gone. So if we turn around to this other side here, these are also sac fry. but you may notice that a lot of them, they're sitting more upright and their yolk sacs are smaller than on the other side. These fry are about a week to 2 weeks older than the ones we just looked at on the other side. It'll take probably another week to 2 weeks before these guys even start thinking about swimming up close.
Okay.
So when these are strong enough and they're swimming up, we'll put a little bit of feed. Then we're going to dump these baskets into the trough itself. They'll get stronger and stronger until we're ready to actually dump them into the big trough down below. Many of them will stay in these troughs until we're ready to stock them out.
What do you?
Sorry, what?
What do you feed them?
When they go on feed, they get a dry fish feed. It looks a lot like, the bigger feed looks a lot like dog food and cat food. It's actually processed with the same kind of machinery as dog food and cat food. The difference is that instead of being formulated with things like beef and lamb and corn, they're formulated with fish meal.
Okay.
These guys, it'll actually be a powder that these guys start eating.
Okay.
So these are brook trout eggs. If you were to look very, very closely at them, you can actually see the developing fry inside the egg. These guys will start hatching here probably in the next week or so.
How many kokanee salmon did you say you had?
Currently on station we have about 350,000. We'll be getting about another 400,000 in today.
Okay. How many brook trout?
There's about 3,000 in there.
Okay. So this will all be filled up then?
By spring, this entire hatchery will be full of kokanee. The brook trout will move over to some circulars here. We're set up here. We're going to be receiving some fall spawn rainbow eggs next week. They will then also go over to the circulars. And so that'll leave all this room for the kokanee salmon. Plus we have 2 raceways outside that will put 100,000 each in.
Okay.
By spring, this will be completely full.
Okay.
We actually stock the kokanee out fairly small compared to a lot of other fish. They end up being more of what you call a fingerling or even smaller than a fingerling. And most of these go to Flaming Gorge and Fontanelle, to the big reservoirs. The lion's share of them go to Flaming Gorge Reservoir.
Okay.
Over here we have Snake River Cutthroat. These guys were eggs this last spring, so we started spawning these in about April, stopped spawning in about June. The fish that are right here, there's about 11,000, and these are all brood recruitment fish. So that means that we will hold on to these fish until they're about 3 to 4 years old, and then we will get eggs from these to continue on and give us more little fish. There's some food. You can see the food that they're eating. It'd be like if you took dog food or cat food and crushed it up. Okay. And this is bigger than what the kokanee will start on. That's literally a dust when they start.
So how big will these get?
We'll see some of these down in the brood building.
Okay. Okay.
Trying to remember how many are in here. Okay, So these are more Snake River cutthroat. These are in a large circular. We also call it a raceway. So as the fish get larger, they take up more and more room. These fish are actually about the same size as the ones we just saw inside, and they're the exact same age, but these are what we would call our production fish, or the fish that we are raising in order to stock. So these fish we will end up stocking out mostly in the Jackson area, a little bit in the Afton area, and they'll be what we call a fingerling when we stock them. So they'll be about the size of an adult finger.
How many are in here, did you say?
In this raceway we have about 50,000 fish.
Okay.
As I say, as they get bigger, they take up more room. We have to thin them out. Behind me, we have 2 raceways that we'll end up putting the kokanee in. We end up with so many kokanee because we raise about 750,000 kokanee. So it takes up a lot of room. So we'll end up putting about 100,000 in each of the raceways there, and then the rest will be filling up the hatchery.
Okay.
We'll end up getting rid of the kokanee about May. These guys we stock into the summer. We'll be rid of these about June.
How do you keep the water from freezing?
Our water actually never freezes. It comes in at about 48, 49 degrees, and it's flowing through the facility so fast that it never has a chance to lose more than a couple degrees.
Okay. So why did Wyoming choose a location right here in Idaho for their hatchery?
Well, when you select a location for a hatchery, it's all about the water. So this is a good water source. This is what you'd call a flow-through gravity station. We do not have to pump a single drop of water at this facility. So economically, that's very advantageous. And fortunately, back in the 1940s, things were possible that may not be as possible today as far as agreements, because it took an agreement between Wyoming Game and Fish, Idaho Fish and Game, State of Wyoming, State of Idaho, and the National Forest in order for this facility to be here.
So what, is it a spring the water comes from?
Yes, it's a natural artesian spring,
Okay.
and it flows down.
Okay.
So most facilities have to worry about having sufficient drop on their water. Then, in order to get water through the facility, you need the water to be able to drop. And this facility, the spring's about 200 feet above the facility, and so we're able to run the whole thing on gravity.
Nice.
Hey, these are more, are you ready?
Yeah.
These are more Snake River cutthroat. These are our 2-year-old fish, which is to say that they're actually in their 2nd year. These fish here are more production fish, but these are ones that we hold on to be catchable size fish. Here we have about 8,000 fish, and most of these will be stocked in the Afton area. They'll be about 8 to 9 inches long when we stock them out.
Where do you stock them?
In the Afton area.
I mean, like in the streams, salt river, reservoirs? What?
By and large, we tend to stock things in standing water.
Okay.
So like a lot of these are going to go to places like Strawberry Reservoir, Swift Creek Reservoir, things of that nature.
How do you get them there?
So we have a stocking truck that it's essentially a flatbed truck that has a fish tank on it. Our fish tank is 300 gallons, and so it essentially works like a home aquarium, except that it is insulated, and it has oxygen that goes into the tank to help the fish, because there's a lot of fish in there, lots of density. But it's actually a very nice environment for the fish to travel in. It's insulated, so the water doesn't tend to get warm as you're traveling along on summer days.
Mm-hmm. How would you get them from here into that truck to haul out?
Well, for these particular tanks, we use what's called a seine, which is a long net. And so it takes two people. You start together and you'd walk up and around and you'd gather all those fish in, and then you would then use a dip net to get the fish out of the seine. We do everything mathematically as far as loading. So before we started loading the fish on, we would have a platform scale and a bucket, and you would weigh several pounds of fish, and then you would count how many fish are in that, and that way you can get how many fish per pound they are at, and then you can mathematically weigh on the fish. So you'd figure out how many fish you need divided by how many fish per pound. That would tell you how many pounds you need to load. It would be very cumbersome to do it by hand and count. Many times we're loading thousands of fish at one time. You'll notice also that we have the shades. That's to give the fish a sense of security. Cutthroat especially tend to be a bashful fish, so they tend to eat better and be healthier if they have a place where they can get under and feel safe. During the summer, this spray shade would be running. There's sprinklers that are suspended upside down, and so in the summer when it wouldn't freeze, we can supply that, and it sprays water down and gives the fish a sense of cover. They tend to really like it, and the birds tend to not like it because they don't want to swim underneath it.
Do you have birds that'll come in and pick fish out of there?
Yeah, on these larger fish, we can get osprey that'll come in, and then on the little fish, we'll get kingfishers that'll try to get them.